About the film video, about a good movie. Hey, what are you doing? Are you making a video?
God, dude. You gotta stop doing that.
Yes, I was about to make a video. I'm just filling up my water bottle.
By the way, I don't think you knew because you sleep in all the time. There might be some virus going on in the water, so you probably don't want to drink tap water.
You're saying that our city somehow has a skin-eating virus through the water.
I don't know. It just happened like 2 hours ago, maybe 3.
Whatever. I had worse.
Yeah, I was gonna just drink like water bottles or not just drink water at all. But I guess we're the same person, so it doesn't really matter, so have fun with that.
Dude, nothing is as bad as LA tap water. I should be fine.
Hello and welcome back to Screen Film, where we usually analyze movies and genres and discuss them thoroughly, mostly. Today, to celebrate school basically being over with summer, I'm gonna do one of my favorite summer movies, Cabin Fever. Cabin Fever was released in the early 2000s. Realistically, it was probably from 2000 to 2003. Directed and co-written by Eli Roth. For those that aren't familiar with Eli Roth's work, he's worked on Hostel, Green Inferno, Knock Knock, Thanksgiving, and the new movie that's coming out, Borderlands. He's also produced a few movies. I think his most famous producing role was in Haunt, which was released in 2019 on Shudder. Roth has also been in a few acting roles, with his most famous one, according to me, being Donnie Donowitz, otherwise known as the Bear Jew.
Have you heard Aldo the Apache? You got heard about the Bear Jew. I heard of the Bear Jew.
Cabin Fever was Roth's directorial debut, and actually is one of the many reasons how he was able to work with Quentin Tarantino on Inglourious Basterds, and also having him produce Hostel. This movie has also won a few awards and has been nominated for at least 3 or 4. So with all that in mind, you would think that this would leave a big landmark in horror history. Nowadays, it kind of feels like no one's even heard of the name before.
I never even heard the name before.
This movie has a ranking of 5.6 stars on IMDb. It had $1 million budget and grossed $30.6 million in the box office, which is really good for 2002 to 2003. We're going to be determining if this movie is still relevant and should still be watched with 3 main questions. Does the movie still hold up? Does it impact Hollywood or society? And if it's still rewatchable to this day. As well, if you find this interesting at all, please don't just use my video for this. This movie is available to be streamed on HBO Max. I believe it's also on YouTube for money. So if you're willing to either pay a few bucks or you already have HBO Max, go ahead and just watch it. It's a fun movie. Or not condoning this at all, but you could also, use some sites to see some free movies. And then there are going to be a lot of spoilers throughout this video. I'll do another spoiler warning when I get to the story, but throughout, if I'm going to be describing something, I'm probably going to be using it directly from the movie. So spoilers ahead, and with all that in mind, let's get straight into cinematography. The cinematography in this movie isn't really anything super unique, something like M, but that doesn't mean that it's still impactful to the story. You get very close-up shots of very important things that are happening throughout the story. An example of this would be when we see Karen with less skin on her face. We get a nice zoom in on that to kind of give us a shocking moment in the movie. As well with that as when Karen drinks the contaminated water, we get close-ups of the actual glass with the water in it as Paul puts down the cup on the cabinet or whatever he puts it on, and then when she drinks it, we get a nice close-up shot of that to kind of let everyone know that stuff's about to go down. There are also some pano shots that kind of give a lingering vibe that kind of set the creepiness tone of the movie, which work very well. It's best done with the water and then sometimes in the woods is when that panel really works. There's an interesting shot where Bert is hunting for squirrels. The camera is kind of being in his perspective. He's looking to the right, and we do a quick whip pan to the left, which makes it look really interesting. Turns out it's just the hermit that Bert shot. Womp womp. Everything that's important is always in frame. That's just kind of standard cinematography overall. So it does the important things of keeping everything in focus and as well as just making sure that everyone knows exactly what's going on. And then one unique thing is whenever Paul is talking about the bowling accident, they kind of film it like a cop thriller where you get close-ups and kind of just a movement flow of the camera with people's bandaged hands, as well as them all kind of being close together in the dark. You also get that movement with the camera as you see everyone's faces when their friend or coworker is dying. We get that nice shot of them all being panicked, and it's all nice and close and tight. There is a shot that replicates the infamous Texas Chainsaw Massacre shot with Pam. For those that have never seen the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it's a lingering dolly shot of Pam going to the house and a kind of a lower angle where it's more of her button frame than anything else. But as well with that scene, you're also getting the ideology of whatever's in the house is more of a dominant thing in that habitat where Pam is just looking for help, which is a really nice shot. But in Cabin Fever, they replicate it. Obviously, this shot has been replicated hundreds of times, even in the own Texas Chainsaw Massacre universe, those bizarre movies. It's nothing really new, but it's also very kind of interesting to see other people kind of have their unique style of doing that shot. One of the most important shots is also another panel, but this one is with two little kids filling up water in a gallon cooler. I'll have a picture of here what a gallon cooler is for those that don't understand. And eventually, we see them filling it up. In another slow panel shot, we see Paul laying on the ground, dying or is dead, letting the audience know that the blood that's going into that gallon cooler is going to infect the townsfolk and many other people ahead of its time, which is pretty smart camera movements. I've covered the more important cinematography moments in this section. Obviously, there are way more details that I can go into play, but again, just see the movie for yourself. It's a really good movie for a good time. So let's go ahead and move on to lighting. The lighting in this movie just simply feels natural. It doesn't really feel like studio lights unless they're in a building, which is really nice. So for those that don't really understand the meaning of natural light and studio light, let me grab something real quick. This ring light is a example of studio lighting. It's artificial lighting with LEDs and whatnot, where you get more of a clear picture of said thing. So with this light, I'm giving myself a artificial light of making sure that you guys can see me clearly. But I don't really use this light anymore for recording, only because I somehow was able to get really bright ass monitors for my videos. An example of natural lighting is the lighting that's going on behind the background, where that's covering my Lord of the Rings stuff, because I'm a nerd. So that lighting is kind of my backlight stuff, so I like getting that natural light in kind of make the background more alive, I guess. That's a good explanation, I guess, for studio lighting and natural lighting. Natural lighting is just you use the actual sunlight outside for perfect lighting. Obviously, probably in this movie, they used diffusers and everything to kind of make the lighting not too harsh. It's not going to be as harsh as some artificial studio lighting overall. This movie, the brightness of the lighting doesn't feel too harsh or too soft, so it just feels perfect in my eyes. The lighting at the campfire is actually a pretty good shot of this movie. That's a representation of natural lighting, I guess, is that fire that they use, especially when they're around the campfire making s'mores or just marshmallows. They don't have chocolate or graham crackers. That's basically all I have for lighting. There's nothing too much to talk about. It just feels fine. It's not too annoying to really pinpoint specific things of if it's too dark or too soft. Let's go ahead and move on to sound and music. So I'm going to be combining sound and music together just to kind of make my life easier. This is a section that I'm not really the best at with my expertise, so obviously later down the line I'll be getting better with what to say with sound and music. Just kind of stick with me. So I'm going to start off with sound first to kind of get the worst part out of the way. The worst part isn't my explanation of it, don't worry. It sounds pretty good in this movie. The sound of this movie kind of simple, kind of just people walking around. It all sounds natural. The gun sounds actually do sound pretty well in this movie. It's nothing that doesn't sound like they just plugged it into a editing software and just said screw it. Kind of feels like they actually wanted to use blank firing guns, which kind of makes the sound better. Whenever Paul kills Karen, or Mercy kills Karen, that is, the shovel thuds that are used actually sound pretty good. I mean, they probably did smack something with that to kind of make it easier. But also, I don't know. Overall, everything kind of feels nice. You know, when people are throwing up blood, it sounds gross, which is good to have, especially when we're talking about a skin-eating infection. Kind of want some of that nasty, gorier stuff happening while we're seeing it. Foot sounds and everything, it all sounds good. You know, they're in the woods, there's some leaves on the ground, so they're actually in nature, isolated, so it's pretty good. Now on to music. The music is very creepy and edgy, and it works for this movie. The cellos that they use, flawless. It sounds really creepy. At least I believe they're cellos. It does a really good representation of letting the audience know that something bad's gonna happen, and it kind of slowly eases itself in, and then it kind of goes louder whenever something bad is really happening. The music when the main characters are going to the cabin at the beginning, it's kind of generic rock music, but it's just to let the audience know that, hey, these are generic people listening to their own stuff. doesn't really matter. If you're wondering about that generic music, rock-ish music that they use, it's not too bad. Just nothing I've ever heard of. I know this section is smaller than everything else, but again, this is just, I'm not the best at talking about sound and music just yet, so you're gonna have to bear with me with that. I definitely think overall the sound in the music is pretty solid in this movie. Eli Roth knows what he's doing. So let's move on to something that I actually do kind of know more about, and that's special effects. The special effects in this movie are pretty solid. KMB Effects, who are the people who worked on this, they also worked on Hostel, did a really good job on this movie. Everything just looks disgusting in a good way. It's what makes this movie gnarly and iconic at the same time. It feels like other horror movie special effects during this time, because around this time we're starting to get the reboots of, say, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where the whole point is just for it to be gory and bloody, basically, just to show off what we can do now. But with this movie, it feels different because it's more of the ideology of what would it look like if we actually had a flesh-eating infection in our body, what would it do? And I feel like this is a good representation of what it might do. You know, the Hermit's design throughout the movie just gets even grosser and grosser. So at first he's just normal, and then when he meets Bert for the first time, he has like bloodshot eyes, kind of not looking well, and then when he gets to the cabin, he looks like a mess, just bloody all over, like literally needs help. And then, you know, once he gets torched, he has like his decaying body. That looks really well done, literally. You know, it also makes you feel uncomfortable with him being on camera, like you're wanting him to go away from you, which really works out well. I think another infamous shot that kind of makes the gore and the special effects shine very well is Marcy's tub scene. So after she has sex with Paul, because they're like, it's the end of the world ordeal, she goes in the tub and she's kind of shaving her leg. But slowly but surely, she starts getting the scabby look on her legs. So she's just shaving her legs and she's just starting to get the scab, and eventually just gets really bloody. She starts panicking. Like, you see her run out of the cabin, her legs are just covered in blood. And it's just, the idea of someone using a razor over a scab is just disgusting. It just makes this work very well. And then obviously Karen's face after the dog gets to her is really nice and kind of feels like the dog got to the bone. And it's just a shock of what the dog has done to Karen while Paul was trying to figure out what's going on. It's really nice. Apparently Eli Roth has said in an interview for, I believe, Thanksgiving, that he's just stopped counting how much fake blood he uses in the movie, which is a smart idea. But there's a small part of me that's like, I kind of wish I knew how much gallons of fake blood they used. I'm gonna say for sure they used at least 2 to 3 gallons of fake blood. Could be more, could be less, who knows? Probably is never gonna be there. And if you say to use IMDb trivia is a little sketchy, so, because anyone can just put in whatever, like Wikipedia. It's not a very trustworthy site for trivia. But that's pretty much all I have for special effects. It's all nice and gory, it makes you feel uncomfortable, and it suits the film very well, and kind of makes it infamous for the gore. So let's go ahead and just move on to acting. The acting in this movie is pretty solid. The main cast generally feels like early 2000 college students who are wanting to be stereotypes, and it just works out pretty well. They all do a very fine job of playing themselves. The townsfolk also feel kind of creepy and mysterious, which is kind of the point, but also it fits in very well with the ideology of the story in a way. You know, the townsfolk, they also feel like random people from the Friday the 13th movies or even the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, which obviously Eli Roth has kind of made the point that he's inspired by those movies to make stuff like this. Speaking about the main characters and somewhat, let's go ahead and introduce some of them. We have Marcy and Jeff, who are the horny couple of the group. I'll explain later how horny they are. We have Bert. He's kind of the goofball of the group. He's not the smartest guy, you know, because he kind of is the one that started everything in a way. You have Karen, who's kind of the stereotypical nice girl. You might think that she's the final girl. Spoilers, but she's not. And then you have Paul, who is kind of the same like Karen, kind of like that nicer type. He's more of the main character, and his kind of trope is that he likes Karen a lot. Before I kind of forget him, we do have Winston. He's a deputy to the sheriff's department. He's goofy. He's a partier, so it's kind of his trait of just being a cop, but also a party man. Then we have the best side character of this movie, which is Justin, which is Eli Roth's cameo. And oh my god, he makes me laugh every time I watch this movie. The main cast generally just feels like overall just stereotypical college kids who want to party, do drugs, and have sex. That part of Marcy and Jeff that I said that I was going to explain, I'm going to explain it here now. Whenever they get to the cabin, Marcy and Jeff just instantly go into the bedroom that they're staying in and just start having sex. It's quick. Like, it gets to the point where Paul's like, alright guys, we're going to go swimming, and then interrupts them having sex. He's like, oh, cool. Okay, have safe sex, bye, and then leaves. So it's kind of their trope of being the horny couple. And then again, eventually Marcy does her whole thing eventually with Paul, where she's like, it's like the end of the world, and it's like, you just want to grab the closest person and just start having sex with them. And Paul's like, wait, what? And then they have sex. They're kind of the more hornier couple of the group. Throughout the beginning, they're also kind of on each other, kind of smooching each other. So it's kind of pointed out before they even get to the cabin that they're the couple of the group. Also, whenever Justin shows up to the bonfire and they're like, hey, this is a private party, sorry, he literally just goes, okay, well, I'm gonna smoke this whole big bag of weed all by myself. And they're like, wait, no, join us. And it's very goofy, but it also establishes that they're college kids. They're kind of here to relax, do whatever they want. It's very good for us to kind of start liking them now before everything else goes downhill and we might not like them at the end of the movie. That's pretty much all I have for the acting part in this movie. It's all pretty well done. You know, we see the characters be a specific trope and then they all kind of, some of them somewhat switch to a different trope, which is very nice to see. So like Jeff, he's like this, he's part of that horny couple, and then he turns into this coward who's like a germaphobe, which I think is very unique. And then he eventually just leaves the movie for a little bit and we kind of forget about him. But like that whole ideology of just us kind of seeing how these people react to everything, it feels very natural and it's really good. Let's go ahead and move on to story. So here I'm going to be going through the whole story from the beginning to the end. So if you're here and you kind of want to watch the movie, stop the video, watch the movie, then come back. Or if you're going to be that kind of person, just get spoiled and have the movie ruined for you. So first I'm going to go over the IMDb description of what the movie is. I'm looking at my screen real quick just to read this so I read it correctly. 5 college graduates rent a cabin in the woods and begin to fall victim to a horrifying flesh-eating virus, which attracts the unwanted attention of the homicidal locals. So now that I got that and you're like, oh, this is interesting, I want to watch the movie. Watch the movie, please. Just watch it. So now to the spoiler section. Yay! So let's get into it. The movie starts with Henry, the hermit. He's doing something with a rabbit and he goes to his dog and is like, hey dog, I got food for us. His dog somehow died, we don't know. He kind of lifts up the dog's leg. He gets splashed with blood. Cut to the college kids getting ready to leave college and then they're off doing their thing. Eventually they stop at a grocery store to get food, snacks, alcohol, whatever, where they also get a weird vibe from the locals there. Also, there's a kid named Dennis. He'll be brought back soon enough, so just remember the name Dennis. And he also likes to bite people in the hand. Remember that. So eventually, they get to the cabin after the grocery store and they start doing their horror movie character tropes. Marcy and Jeff go ahead and have sex. Bert goes out into the woods, does whatever he wants with a rifle. We'll get to the rifle soon. And then that leaves Paul and Karen kind of swimming and then they kind of do a falling in love situation. While Bert is hunting for squirrels, he shows poor form of shooting a gun. I would never give him a gun after seeing this movie. Eventually, while he is doing that, he eventually thinks he sees a squirrel, shoots it, and it turns out it is Henry, the hermit. Henry, at this point, he's got the virus. It's kind of starting to infect him. Bert kind of freaks out, tells him to stay away, and then he eventually runs off, go back to the cabin. Later that night, during the bonfire scene, we get that Paul tells that story of the bowling alley incident. Then Justin shows up, does his thing, realizes that it's about to storm. He leaves for us to assume that he's going to come back. There's a knock at the door. They think it is Justin. It turns out it's Henry, looking more disgusting than ever. They all kind of panic. Bert tells him to not help him. He gets in their truck. Eventually, all 3 guys go out and try to stop him. Also, the girls show up. They spray him with, I believe, bug spray, and then Paul accidentally torches him on fire with a torch, and then he runs off to be dead. We'll see what happens with him later on. So after this, that next day, they all kind of spread out to do their own thing. Bert and Jeff go and see this weird lady who's talking about farm. Turns out that she's related to Henry, so they kind of panic and they leave. Paul and Karen are at the cabin when Winston shows up, being the police, to kind of see what's going on. He tells them that he's going to get them a tow truck, foreshadowing of what happens later in a way. And then Marcy meets up with Jeff and Bert at a random house to see if they can get help. Eventually, after we see that Marcy, Bert, and Jeff are together, we get a scene of Paul and Karen together. Paul gives her the water. That's very mysterious. She drinks the water after that to kind of calm her down. Then eventually, when everyone gets back to the cabin, they're kind of relaxing, and then Paul kind of tries to have sex with Karen. Turns out, near her spot, she's all bloody. Paul panics. They all go in, see that she's got the virus, so they kick her out of the house into the shed, kind of treat her like an animal. animal, and then they all start trying to figure out what to do from there. Eventually, Bert gets it. I don't remember how. I'll probably figure it out. So editor me, please put it up here if you remember. Bert gets it. They're about to move Karen to get her to a doctor. She starts puking up blood. Bert says heck no, and he drives off. We slowly see him also getting his symptoms of the virus. He goes to the town trying to get help from one of the guys at the grocery store, and his son is Dennis. We get one of the coolest shots of Dennis in slow-mo doing some cool martial art tricking. He does like a flying side kick and then a butterfly kick, and then he bites Bert's hand because that's what he does. After Dennis bites Bert, Dennis's dad's kind of doing his whole spiel of, oh, my son bit you, but you have this virus, so if he dies, it's technically your fault and whatever. Dennis's dad and like 2 other guys get guns and they start charging towards Bert. Bert drives off and they chase after them. During this, kind of before Bert goes to the grocery store, Jeff decides to take a few beers and just leaves the movie for a little bit to not get infected by anyone. Here we have the whole thing with Marcy and Paul doing the banging while Karen is in the shed. After that, Paul kind of goes out to take a walk, and then he falls in some water, and then eventually he finds out that Henry was in that water, and then he follows the trail. We find out that Henry's body in that water was connected to the water reserve at the cabin. Eventually, before we all figure out this, we kind of already get a shot of that. I want to bring it up here because it's more of the whole like ideology of the film of Paul realizing, oh no, it's in the water. Here we get Marcy in the tub doing her thing. She panics, she goes out, and then there is a dog that shows up with the virus. It's kind of a hostile dog. I do believe it is Justin's dog. His dog does show up. I think it's Dr. Mumbo is the name, kind of a cute name. And then eventually, every so often in the movie, they're shooting at the dog to get it away. Eventually, no one's there to shoot at the dog, so Marcy gets killed by the dog. Paul gets back, sees that she's dead. Paul goes to the shed, sees that the dog is getting Karen. And eventually, here is when Paul kills the dog. Then he goes to check on Karen. Karen's basically dead here in a way, so he mercy kills her. And then Bert comes back, tells Paul what's happening in a way, and then they bunker down in the cabin. The 3 guys from the grocery store come, and then they do a small shootout where Bert and the 3 grocery store guys die. Paul is the only survivor, so he goes out, takes, I believe, the grocery store's truck, and he's trying to get help. Eventually, he stumbles upon Winston at a party. Here, obviously, if you couldn't tell, Winston promised Paul that he was going to get the tow truck to them. They did not get the tow truck, so Paul is mad at Winston, and then he kind of fights a few of the party people there. He gets a harmonica guy's harmonica in his throat. So now Paul knocks out Winston, so then he's stumbling upon the road, falls on the ground, almost gets hit by a truck, and then next shot is him in the hospital where he sees a bunny man who will never figure out who played him because the credits said that they'll never tell. Kind of mean. Eventually Paul wakes up and is starting to somewhat confess to the cops that are there. They kind of realize what's happening. They drag Paul out of the hospital to kind of kill him. Here we get Jeff walking around. He's a character and still alive, so he goes out and goes back to the cabin, realizes he's the only one alive, he celebrates, and then he gets gunned down by the police. So then eventually they grab his body, they all torch all the bodies that they can to stop the disease. The sheriff asks Winston if he took care of Paul. He says yes, and it turns out that Paul landed by the creek where the little kids are at, filling up their water to give to people. Then we get a shot of a truck with spring water heading out of the town. So after quickly going through the whole story, I'm going to simplify it in case you thought that was confusing. Kids go to cabin, Hermit gets infected, Hermit shows up at cabin, Hermit dies, college kids eventually slowly get killed off, main character either is slowly dying or is dead as he lays down by a creek to see that the infection will still be happening. And that's pretty much it. Now to some goods and bads of the movie, and then we'll wrap up. So some good and bads that I found for this movie, I'm only going to be doing like 3 each in a way to kind of see, just to show what I feel about this movie. We'll go with some of the bads in a way. Some bads is kind of doesn't feel original. I think that's only because we've seen The Cabin before in Evil Dead. And then for those that have never seen this movie, you know, it reminds you of The Cabin in the Woods and anything like that. So it doesn't feel original with that. It kind of also peels some of the goofiness of other cliche horror movies in it as well. I know like Winston's supposed to be a more laid back cop, kind of like the cops in Halloween 4, which were all goofballs. The movie kind of pokes at them kind of being unimportant characters with clown music.
I'm telling you, man, this is a major party town.
Really?
Are you kidding me, man? You know what it's like? Like when you go to a new town, right, and you're the new guy?
All clear. Nothing above, nothing below.
Some of the characters tropes are kind of boring in a way. I feel like Bert overall is kind of my least favorite character. That's probably only because they kind of make him more mentally not like the others. In a way, he's kind of that friend in the group who's not the smartest one, but he's there because he likes the same things as everyone. So he's just kind of an annoyance in a way. He has some weird stuff that he does that's like realistically in a out of context at a way makes it fine, but then he kind of does things last minute and it's like you shouldn't have said that then. And then I guess here's where I'll introduce the rifle more. And for my last complaint, Jeff could have totally hit the dog if he was a better shot. If you don't know what the rifle is, and before you type it out in Google what the rifle is, I'll tell you. It is a Ruger Mini 14. It is basically the more civilian type of M14 used, you know, like the M14 in, you know, like the Vietnam War, that M14, or the EBR 14 from Call of Duty if you're a Call of Duty fanatic, that rifle. So this is also a unique way of showing how characters either know how to use guns or whatnot, kind of with them being college kids, you know, they live in like they possibly live in like suburban areas, so they probably have never touched a rifle. So you have like Bert, who's kind of treating the gun not how you should be treating it. He's also shooting it in not a smart way. Hold up, let me get a representation. Alright, because I grew up in the early 2000s, I have a Nerf blaster here for a demonstration. I'm gonna scoot back so you can see, maybe, I might be blurry. So, how Bert uses the gun is he kind of points it like this at an angle. Somewhat in his shoulder, not really, kind of more out. This is not how you shoot a gun, Bert. This is not how you do it. Jeff does it better in actually shouldering the rifle pretty well. I hope the plastic isn't too loud. But he actually does a good representation of how to hold a rifle pretty well. But again, Jeff could have totally hit that dog if he knew how to use either, I believe there's still iron sights on the gun. He could have easily known how to hit the dog. So the Ruger Mini 14 can either be shot in 5.56 nano or 223 Remington. 223 Remington is good for about 200 to 300 yards. That's pretty far. 300 yards is roughly a football field, if I remember correctly. That's a pretty good distance. That dog should not be that far away from them, because we hear the dog pretty loudly. As well, it probably is that Jeff is just doing warning shots, which I feel like at this point is kind of dumb to do warning shots at a feral dog that is trying to kill you, kind of like Cujo. So I feel like he could have just easily hit the dog, and then Bert does have the infection, but they were able to possibly stop a few ways of some people getting killed. Obviously, they're not, because it's a movie and they're stereotypical dumb college kids, so whatever. That is some goods. This movie is, special effects are good, as I've said before. Does really good with storytelling of kind of how everything progresses throughout the movie. It's very well done. And then it generally just feels like a campy movie, which again kind of is a bad thing, but also is good, because sometimes if you ever wanted to watch a relaxing movie, you don't want anything that's super serious. This kind of is more on the serious side, but it's also campier, so you can have it in the background and not be worried about that you're missing out stuff. So that's pretty much all I have for the good and bads. Again, just like in our modern horror movies failing, the list can be way longer, but that's pretty much all I have. Now that I covered the goods and bads of the movie, let's just go ahead and go straight into the statement and then the end of the video. So, statement, I'm just gonna do this real quick. There's like 3 to 4 different possibilities of what the overall meaning is for the movie. One could just simply be, don't drink any water that's infested with a virus, you know? So, pretty good plan. Could be an STD or an AIDS warning to let everyone kind of be aware that, oh yeah, this is totally what happens if you get an STD or an AIDS, you know, something, you know, Jurassic that makes younger people like, safe sex for me, no that premarital sex, sinners. But it could also be a way just to kind of tell people, hey, be nice to everyone, don't judge people. And then there is also the ideology of how we all kind of treat that kind of like contagious stuff. We kind of just shove it away, kind of cage it up like an animal, like Karen, where she was locked up in the shed. We have a rabid dog going around doing its thing, trying to bite people. So it could also be that. I kind of like to go with any of them, really. I do like the idea of never judge a person. I think that's a good one, especially with a creepy town like that. You don't know what they're doing with their life, and you're kind of pushing judgment of stereotypes on everyone, which is never a good thing. But I feel like that also is a good warning of people just saying, treat everyone respectfully. You know, the golden rule. Treat others how you want to be treated. So with that in mind, let's just go ahead and go to the ending. So we are now at the end of the video where we get to ask the 3 questions. First off, does this movie still hold up to this day? Yes, it is way better than other movies that are coming out to this day. And it also kind of feels like a time capsule as well of early 2000s where digital cameras are still a newer thing. So most people are still filming on 35mm or whatever to get their stuff, where you kind of have to make sure everything's going correctly or else you just wasted a lot of money. Where with digital cameras, it's easier. So it kind of feels like that time capsule of just, I personally think, some of the best times in cinema history of how everything was made and it feels nice. Did it make an impact on Hollywood society? Yes, only on Hollywood. You know, we have Eli Roth being this new creator coming into play, and he's working with one of the greatest directors of all time on his other movies, that being Quentin Tarantino, and they're kind of working together to make some really good movies. Is it still rewatchable? Yeah, I definitely think this movie is rewatchable. I definitely think it needs at least 2 showings to kind of pinpoint ideas of stuff. Like, one of my favorite shots is, in a way, it's with Paul in the beginning. You know, he's down by the creek because Dennis bit his hand, and he's washing his hand out the creek, and he's also with dogs, so we also get the whole thing of, oh, dogs are kind of also evil, and also, you know, him and a dog do die at the end of the movie, and also Paul's by water, where he eventually dies at the end of the movie. So it's very good storytelling to kind of pinpoint ideas to on a second watch. And that's pretty much Cabin Fever. I hope you guys generally enjoyed this video. I try to get this out as quickly as possible, just with all of school ending. This is actually my second time recording this. The first time, everything was blurry and it annoyed me, so I had to quickly shoot all of this again. So I hope this one's as good as what I potentially thought the original was going to be. That's right, it's roughly the same time of how long it took the film, kind of going a little faster with pace with this one. Over that said and done, thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you liked this video and you want to see more, please press the like button and also subscribe to help grow my channel so other people can see it, and also share it with some friends too. Same thing, that this channel can grow and expand. That's pretty much all I have for you today. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.